This is Steve in the afternoon at BBC Radio 2 and the next hour, summer surgery, latest on swine flu.
Who's like, he looks like he's wearing a wig and bad makeup and fake tits. Like, that's where I think some of the problems and people are having difficulty seeing, because obviously young people are seeing people transition. They're not really seeing old people. You know, Dave is now called
Davina.
Samantha. Yeah.
But another issue is with feminist movements is they actually don't like, some feminist movements don't like the idea of trans, or especially men transitioning into women, because they feel it's an encroachment on their private places like the toilets and places like that. They feel that men are constantly around them, and they find that to be a great offence. They also don't think that they could ever be true women, because you know, being a woman is a full blown sort of experience. You can't really artificialize that or make yourself feel what it's like to be a woman. Sort of feel the sexual relations between a woman and a man can't be replicated with a trans woman and a man necessarily, because they didn't go through it at childhood and things like that.
Like, imagine, right? You've been a bloke for the last 40 years of your life.
Yeah.
You've had male privilege. You've never been raped. Never been sexually assaulted. Never been catcalled.
Yeah.
You never had anything. And you're white male. Or you're straight. You've never had any problems. You then transition to a woman. You then get all of the privilege gone away from you, apart from white privilege, and then you get automatically
and quotas for hiring.
Yeah. And also then you're all automatically I know what women go through.
It's not the same, is it?
I wouldn't think so.
So Chris, you've not said anything yet on this.
Well, firstly, there was no question. You didn't ask a question, but
no, we're just having an introductory sort of just chat about.
Right. Okay.
So the difference between the experience of women. And I'm not going to use the politically correct terms here, which is things like period having persons and things like that, which are terms that I'm going to use woman to mean biological female. There's currently a female campaigner who's sort of she's behind that dictionary definition on a billboard of what woman is.
But is it Posey Parker?
Yeah, Posey Parker. Yeah, she's quite cool and. But so carry on as you were, Chris.
Well, you picked up on what they call TERFs, which is trans exclusionary radical feminists.
TERF.
Yes. They are essentially. I don't.
Is this some second wave feminism, Chris?
Well, to be honest, I don't really know. But the way that it's been portrayed is as something quite extreme or unorthodox, when in actual fact, it appears to be fairly normal and moderate.
What are you talking about specifically? You didn't give a subject matter for what is normal or what is extreme there.
No, like the existence of a group which has been defined as trans exclusionary radical feminists, which makes it seem.
It makes them sound more extreme than they are.
Yeah.
Whereas actually the message that they're putting forward is a logical one.
Yeah.
Which is that the experiences of a non-biological woman are innately different to the experiences of a biological woman.
Yeah. So we can start off with this sort of there as the first question is, what is it really to be trans? But the issue with the question so broad as that is I can't really bring up this sort of subject without it being in reference to not the norm. You can't just say what is transgenderism. It has to sort of be described in conjunction because the name to me denotes difference rather than something that exists in its own right. It's not something that's evolved concurrently with male and females through history. It's a relatively new phenomenon, at least in the way it manifests itself now. So how do you define transgenderism? Is it a permanent thing? Is it a
Who's that to?
well? It's open floor. It's an open floor.
I'll let you go, Chris.
I suppose even the definition of what is transgender has been perverted in its relatively short history.
Yeah.
Because it's now intersex, non-binary, gender fluid, all of those things, which is not really what it is at all. Transgender means that, in the classical sense, that you're
Transitioning.
the gender that you are socially does not relate to the sex you are biologically. So, in other words, a woman in a male body or a man in a female body. That's all it ever should mean. It doesn't mean anything
There
else.
is a medical condition that has been, I can't remember the name of it. It's a form of philia. It was a word that I only discovered a few days ago. That lady I was talking about earlier, that feminist activist. But she was talking about a lot of doctors that have come up with the idea that actually this idea of socially constructed gender is nonsense, and actually these are very extreme forms of transgenderism is a very extreme form of a fetish of being in love with oneself as somebody else, and that trans people in some form derive sexual pleasure from themselves through being able to feel themselves as a woman, and it's actually an extreme sexual fetish.
That might be true in a minority of cases, and certainly in terms.
So, just starting from where you were talking about certain people use it. There's a minority of people.
Is that?
There's a minority of trans people in the community that actually it's actually a form of a fetish for them, and they use transgenderism to advance that sexual desire. Would that be fair? Chris?
Who are you talking to? Oh, me.
Yeah, he's not even
yeah,
listening.
so in like a minority of cases, there are people who identify this for their own socio-political gains, as it were, because they're generally weird. But it doesn't really.
But how do we know that even non-offend? I'm not talking about they necessarily commit sexual offences or anything like that. But how do we know that all transgender people don't derive some, even if it's unconscious or subconscious sexual, so even if it's just obviously just psychological pleasure from being physically the other or feeling physically like the other gender, i.e. with gender reassignment surgery and plastic surgery and
that's
taking
perfectly
hormones.
possible.
Yeah.
By definition.
Yeah, that's perfectly possible.
So, would you say there's a similarity between some of these activist movements and, say, NAMBLA in the United States that try and advance the legalization of paedophilia?
Oh, probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's that, you know, that website that we were going on, like about joining strange cults and things like that.
Yeah, just to clear this up, this wasn't anything to do with paedophiles. This was a website you and I were on. I was
not part of this.
No, I found it on a funny YouTube video. It's a directory online for all sort of cults and associated living arrangements and all, you know, people that are into all that sort of stuff. So there's hippie communes on there and things like that, but there's also full blown cults on there. And non-established breakaways from your standard faiths.
So like Momentum's on there, is it?
Yeah, Momentum's on there.
May as well be.
Dwindling membership. So
throw in Black Lives Matter as well, and you'll have the complete picture.
Yeah. So, what is the difference between transgender and intersex?
With transgender, you're changing your gender. Intersex is where you're either born with both parts, or a mixture of, one part but actually majority another. Yeah,
but are you saying, so is intersex the new politically correct term for a what they called? Hermaphrodite, yeah, that's the word.
Yeah,
in my mind.
Yeah, intersex people have always been around.
That's what it is. Yeah.
So
obviously, it's a very, very small number, but it's always been around.
So I'm not an expert on the genetics of what the genes are of a hermaphrodite, but aren't they always one or the other in terms of their biological sex? They just have different genitals, and that's a deformity.
Yes.
So, and it can be either way, can't it?
But there are people in certain communities, again, going back to the socio-political advancements of this, that make reference to the fact that there's sort of like Y chromosomes. From my research, they only appear in birds. We're not birds.
No, we're not. But
what only appears in birds?
What kind of bird do you mean?
The what? Like a bird
what
in a tree.
only appears in birds?
Like an avian bird, because obviously I don't know.
You're too close to the microphone. I can't hear you.
You can't hear me.
That's better.
That's because we were talking over each other.
Yeah. So, what? Only Y chromosomes appear in birds?
Yeah, it's like Y chromosomes in birds, which only appear in birds. They don't appear in humans. And they use this as a scientific justification for the acceptance of strangely... Well, I don't know what it is. They use that as an argument for the legitimacy of transgenderism.
When actually there's no genuine genetic science that backs it up.
No.
I really don't know. I'm not a biologist.
No, we're just chatting here. So, but I have to know because this is my field of research at the moment that
oh, really nice.
Paedophilia.
Oh, is it that clown's book?
No. Paedophilia happens in grey ape communities. So chimpanzees.
Hold on.
You get paedophile chimpanzees.
You have to define first.
What?
The observation of paedophilia. Is paedophilia only in the human? Like, obviously human, because we have a sense of moral.
No, that's what I just said. No. Yeah, no, I see what you're trying to say, but the sexual... I'm not going to say... Yeah, I know what you're sort of saying. Is it abuse if it's an animal because it doesn't have a moral compass? But that sexual instinct, at least, exists. And this is adult chimpanzees abusing infant chimpanzees that aren't directly related.
When you mean abusing...
Obviously I'm using... They're the terms we know, but I know what you're saying. Can it be abuse if there's no moral compass? But what I'm saying, the sexual impulse is still there, which is interesting.
Oh yeah, it's like we're saying when a bitch is in heat,
When what?
When a bitch is in heat, when a female dog's in heat.
Oh right, yeah.
What dog's just gonna sniff that, and the natural urges come about. There's no sense of, well, is she old enough in dog years?
Is it right? Is it right or wrong?
Hi, Jane.
Because the other issue is chimpanzees also go to war. That's been observed by the people that I don't know what they're called. People that observe apes.
They're also confirmed capitalists.
Do elaborate.
Well, if you look at, it's even in like monkeys.
They've got factories,
things like that they become. The what?
They have factories.
No, not like that. But
that is what.
You just watched Planet of the Apes once. He's like, right.
No, if you
I've never seen them build huge Victorian train stations and things like that.
No, because that's not capitalism. Capitalism is the desire to own property.
It's a fucking
Right now, if you
Well, it's a Marxist phrase originally.
if you've ever, you haven't let me get past my first.
No,
sentence.
I just wanted to ask you some sarcastic points first.
I want to get to my point first.
No, go.
It's not. What are you laughing at? There's literally nothing funny going on.
I can't see Ben's video, but it doesn't matter.
You can't see my video?
No, it just says Benjamin's
he's
video is
laughing.
connecting. Neither of us can see you.
No, Chris can see me.
Oh, right.
I can see it. Yeah.
Okay.
Chris, what am I doing now?
You're raising your two fingers.
Actually, I'm doing a Churchill sign, so...
Anyway, what was your point about chimpanzees
Yeah.
being capitalists?
If you go onto any sort of... there's a particular channel on YouTube that does these sort of wildlife videos where they send in robots, like duplicates and things like that, into an environment where there's monkeys and all sorts of like penguins and things like that.
Yeah, very similar, aren't they, penguins and monkeys?
Well,
No, I was being sarcastic.
I'm only
Go
talking
ahead.
about the monkeys, but
Go ahead.
Basically this robot sort of bush baby or whatever it was, I can't quite remember what it was, but it fell out of a tree. No, it was a turtle. Sorry.
So it was a fake. It was a fake turtle disguised to look like a real one.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And basically, I can't remember if it was like a chimp or something like that that was sort of picking it up and playing around with it, and then became defensive when another chimp came to try and get it.
Yeah.
And
How did they decide that
exhibited possessive behaviour?
Yeah, but if I imagine they're possessive over their mates as well. That doesn't necessarily make them capitalists, or words to that effect.
But the fact that they wouldn't share it with anyone else,
right?
And the fact that they wanted to hide it.
Yeah, but when like kids have sweets and they really don't want to share it doesn't make them capitalists, does it?
Yes.
So they've read, you know.
Das Kapital.
Yeah, I was just trying to find.
Pretty long book for a child to read. No. Of course, we're being flippant because capitalist nature is behaviourally installed in us from birth, according to most Marxian authorities.
Well, humans are naturally selfish. I think every living carbon-based life form, not carbon-based life form, but every sentient being is inherently selfish. You know, one does protect itself first and then helps others.
And there was another discussion about this. I can't remember who it was. It was quite an interesting discussion, and it was that altruism, or the willingness to help people, is only genetically evolved in animals when it's when it's based on their own self-interest. So, you know, in wasps' nests, how they have guard bees that kill other bees that are drunk, which is actually a thing that happens. Is that bees will sting? Does anyone know about this? Like, there's bees that commit altruistic acts to save the hive and things like that. So altruism.
Same thing with ants, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe ants do something similar. But,
warrior ants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's acts of behavioural altruism in nature that is extrapolated. Oh, it was Roger Scruton that was talking about this, but we have the same reason for doing it. It's not necessarily that we're naturally giving or naturally... we're sort of genetically programmed for self-preservation, and our ability to be altruistic is not necessarily a sign that is our human nature. It doesn't embody.
But also, we are inherently humans, kind and compassionate. People would argue, religious people would argue, that people only get moral. You know, we only get our morals from God and from religion. But obviously, Christopher Hitchens would beg to differ.
But it's sort of the thing of, are these traits of compassion and love, are they learned, at least on some level, a learned sort of response? there's something that's required in order to procreate? Is it something that because we're conscious beings, we've formed these conceptions?
I think it's nurture.
Yeah.
The amount of times if you've ever had nieces and nephews or like grandkids or kids, you literally have to say no. You have to share.
Yeah.
It's you have to enforce. Two or more children to share food or share sweets.
On the compassion thing, though, I don't think saying that all of the nice acts that humans are capable of and do are necessarily for the reasons of procreation, because we all have grandparents that are affectionate, and they're not like that because they're going to want to procreate. So why, I don't think that sort of, that naturalistic, maybe sort of pseudo-Darwinian outlook on why humans are the way they are is necessarily always right. What were you going to say, Chris?
Well, surely you've just identified there that altruism is innately linked to materialism, because you're essentially gifting an item, an object, wealth, something like that, as opposed to anything else. I mean, what else can you give? You can give assistance, but giving assistance and nurture are signs of ultra care and psychological, and and being there, being emotionally available. That's I wouldn't call it altruism though.
Yeah,
because altruism essentially is almost synonymous with charity.
Yeah, but
it's essentially you giving something out of the goodness of yourself.
But what's that word? It's utilitarianism. I was about to say it's one of these things where you have to, obviously, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that whole thing coming back from first year of politics.
What theorist was that?
Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Okay, this has been quite intellectual so far, so we might as well keep it up.
Yeah. He obviously says, once you have material wealth, then you can go on to non-material wealth. Once we had drink, water, food,
shelter, and
then
things like
you go
that.
on to shelter, heating.
So actually, in that sense, altruism is only a privilege.
Yeah, because obviously I know it's a kind of a cliche, but you always hear about, charity starts at home. Charity starts at home. All these people saying about, the BBC Children in Need. The reason why they don't support it, because charity starts at home, but they never give to charity at home anyway. So it's a bit pointless I'm saying it. But is what is the point when BBC or the UK government or the UK public can give £20 million to African children, but can't even house.
I don't think the licence fee brigade would be very happy about that. just as a side note, but yeah, go on.
But yeah, obviously, they're giving all this money from the public towards charities abroad, but yet we still have a deficit. Social housing. We have still got homeless people living on the streets. We've still got so many people living in foster care. All these bad things. And obviously, somebody on the left might say, "Well, it doesn't stop giving to people in African countries. They literally got nothing. A person who's got a house to live in has got more than 60% of people in Africa. So you have to look at all these things in context." Chris, should we scrap the licence fee?
Yes.
And then replace it with what?
But what about, isn't it? You sort of torn. Isn't it because it's hard because two things are true at the same time, which is not necessarily a contradiction. Which a lot of people, I think, nowadays think that if two. No, this is what Ben was saying is that. Yes, charity does start at home, and I think building a common purpose in something that's the size of the nation state is a good thing for society, because if you have an idea that people are building towards a common purpose, a common a comradeship in that, so to speak, that's useful, and I think that's psychologically it's a positive psychological sort of. It benefits people psychologically because they think, well, there's a target here that can be achieved, but philosophically, people struggle to see world issues such as famine being, rectified by by small donations. I think it's a psychological disconnect rather than. It's not an inherent self. Some people say, I'm not bothered about Live Aid and all this. It's not necessarily a selfishness. It's just that people have trouble seeing how these large scale problems can be solved in the ways that are currently used. And also the issue of, more politically speaking, while we've pointed out the contradiction, also the issue is block grants to governments that aren't necessarily the most ethical governments in the world isn't necessarily going to benefit the people that actually need the help.
Yeah. So what you've got there is essentially a preference for, when being charitable, donating to things that you have a direct influence or control of.
Yeah.
So you'd be less inclined to vote to give money to water aid or something like that in Africa, because you're not going to see the intended effect. You have no way of measuring that your money is going to make a difference, and in many cases it doesn't anyway.
Yeah, but this is what I was saying about
still there after God knows how many years.
Yeah, and this is what we're saying about how the money's actually distributed, and this goes back to the whole philosophical thing we were talking about earlier about there is an inherent selfishness in almost any altruistic act. So it's very contradictory, isn't it?
Yeah, but therefore it can also be seen as quite immoral because it doesn't take into consideration the fact that what's been said on the tin is not really what's happening.
Yeah.
I just want to tell my 2 cents. I speak to a lot of people where I live. We got loads of charity shops where I live because obviously, a dying high street. What the hell do they put in there? Charity shops. And I feel a lot of people like to get something out of doing it. So a lot of people are happy to go to charity shops and give money to charities, but also they like to have something in return. Yeah. So even if it's like a cup for 50p more than what how much they donate, or like a dress or something, people are willing to do it because they're getting a object benefit coming back to them.
Or maybe Microsoft in Carter 97 from a charity shop in Derby.
I will give you that, Chris. No, but the thing is that some people then are quite nihilistic about charity, and they say to what Ben was saying is they go, well, you just donate to charity so you can get something out of it. You don't actually care about the people you're trying to help. But I don't think that's necessarily true, because there's got to be a reason why you do something, and I think that thing of feeling good isn't about. It's not. You've got to feel like it's worth doing, and they're going to get the help. So,
how many charities are there? If you watch any daytime TV program around about 2 o'clock on BBC, or not BBC, obviously, ITV or Channel 4, you've got, this Sunlight Guarantee, you got charity, dog charity. I was watching the Cats Protection League, I believe.
Yeah.
And it said, for just £5 a month, you could do our lottery.
Donkey Sanctuary, all this.
Yeah. It's like now charities are asking people to pay money for like a lottery ticket where they do it every week. Like, obviously...
Yeah.
But that's good though, isn't it? Because that's the most extreme... That's the most extreme version of the sort of the big selfish bonus for doing it.
Obviously, I know that the lottery makes a lot of money. But then if you go into any charity shop, the mainstream charity shops which sell stuff as well, they don't just sell the stuff donated, they actually import stuff into the charity shop. Sometimes they have scratch cards, which are £1. It's like, well, why? Like, it's out of place. It's also a bit...
It is also strange to have something that, gambling, which has negative consequences, You know, I mean, it could be a charity that's trying to help people that are economically disadvantaged, and then has something in them to make money, which some people do genuinely bankrupt themselves doing.
There's an issue here that relates to the dissertation I did last year, which could be seen to be the increasing corporatisation of charities and charitable bodies.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's got the effort to go on forever, but do you remember the Haitian earthquake?
Oh yeah, Haiti.
Do you remember all the profiteering by and more disgusting things happened as well that charities did, and they're very commercialised. We know people that run these charities have huge salaries. You know, I'm like, you know, large 6-figure salaries, and I'm one of those people that I can be quite charitable, but that sort of thing puts me off giving money to charity voluntarily. I like charity shops because they do a service to me. I like you know, old things and weird things. I just go in for that reason. I'm not going in to be charitable. But that corporate nature of charity, I think, puts not just me, but it puts a lot of people off. And after the Haitian earthquake, where Oxfam was participating in a prostitution ring and things like that, people have a huge distrust of charities, and is their money actually going anywhere?
It doesn't help that charities are part funded by the government on behalf of the taxpayer, because it feeds into this corporate system of charities.
Yeah.
Whereas if donations were more directly under the control of individual people, perhaps the charities would be more focused on satisfying the donors by giving them a measurable
because the institutional behaviour is
effect.
Yeah, because the institutional behaviour of a charity is completely changed if they've got a guaranteed income. Structurally and behaviourally, they know, so they can change their entire operations. But if it's genuinely on you know, the word charity, if it's genuine charity that's driving the charity itself, then I think they probably acts a little bit more ethically.
Which probably explains why in more recent times people have been more willing to donate and contribute to local charities that focus on like community projects and things like that. They're doing very well, and they're not funded by the government, but people have direct control over them. They can see the effect that they're having, and also that's the way it ought to be.
And also, those local charities usually have some form of internal democracy, that people that donate to it can have some say in how it's actually run. But if a charity is top down and has got guaranteed public subsidies, that's really going to change the institutional interests and also the kind of people that are attracted to working in that charity, because you could be an incredibly selfish person and just want lots of money and think, well, I can work in a charity. If your particular skill set is matched with the kind of skills required to run a charity at the top level, that person isn't necessarily going to be charitable. It could be an incredibly horrible and, you know, greedy person, and you're not naturally the charity isn't going to actually help people. It's just going to try and increase the salaries for the top people that run the charity, and that's pretty sad.
Yeah, I didn't apply for a job, but I was going to apply for a job at
What's that? What are you doing? I think
Emma. She has a 6 o'clock start tomorrow.
Oh, well, we'll end this soon. I've just got one last question.
No, it's fine. She's done.
Yeah.
Let me just get some privacy here.
I couldn't see her before you put your hand there.
No, it's fine. You can just say hello. She's completely covered. Don't worry. I was looking for a job do like marketing for a well-known charity in Suffolk, and literally the job is like 18 hours a week, and it was like £29,000.
Yeah,
it's like wow, like that's like.
I worked very briefly for a company that did, you know, the people that are on the streets, you know, with the clipboards, giving you the hard sell, trying to trick you into give.
God, you people.
No, I only did it for 3 days. Right. But I got some sales, and my commission for each one almost matched the actual money they were paying in the standing order. So I failed, that's what I mean. But I failed to understand where the charity was actually getting any money.
See, every time I'm in Nottingham, I was in Nottingham, say, and like people like that would come up to me and go, "Hello," I'd be like, "You use how much you get paid right now, and you donate it."
Yeah, but if their standing order amounts to usually about 60 to 80 quid, I'd get to between 60 and 80 quid commission, and there was a premium paid to me if I got them to commit to doing it for 3 years, I think. So, but that's great for whoever's doing. Well, it's not great; it's commission work, obviously, but relatively speaking, that's great. That's great for the business, and it's great for the person that's getting the commission. But where does the charity win? And also, where does the people that the charity is concerned with win in that? I don't understand. Some people think that those people on the streets are doing it out of the goodness of their heart, and they're not. Even the people that do it for Amnesty International aren't people from Amnesty International. They're agencies that get people to do it for commission.
Oh, but it's people who are paid to get people to...
paid to volunteer, you're about to say, which is true.
Yeah,
that's the irony of it, isn't it?
It's like a well-known, the RNLI. A lot of them are, I think it's 95% of the people are not paid, are volunteers.
Yeah.
But if you got 100,000 people working for you, 5,000 people are paid quite a lot of money, plus you have all these temporary people coming in getting money. I think they're on about £178 million a year they have to get in order to do everything.
Yeah.
Like, when does it... And obviously they come under fire recently because they were apparently near... I don't know if Nigel Farage was involved, but they were apparently waiting for a boat to go into Dover from Calais to help the people come aboard and make them safe. And obviously a lot of people were complaining that, British taxpayers or British money being donated are being used to help illegal activity. When it should just be the Coast Guard, but the RNLI are involved.
Yeah.
So, and that's causing a lot of controversy, meaning that a lot of the crazier people who are saying, "I'm never going to donate again," that harms them, and then...
Yeah, and also you've got the issue there of foreign governments being aware of this operation and knowing that if they're shipped into British territorial waters, they can wash their hands of the humanitarian tragedy that's happening before them, which is very selfish on their part. We always end up footing the bill, and I don't mean that necessarily in a negative way, but it's even more disgusting for other nations to be able to take advantage of what is inherently a charity in Britain that's funded by decent thinking people.
But I think the UK Coast Guard and the UK government are partially responsible, because obviously there is a reason the RNLI do not get any money from the government. If they did, they'd also be paid for it. And obviously,
what do you mean? I'm not too knowledgeable on all this.
Well, on my point or Chris's?
No, the whole thing of why the RNLI isn't supported by the taxpayer.
Well, if the RNLI were paid, like they got active money from the government, then the government will phone up and go, "We want you to do this. We want you to man these beaches. We want you to do this." And then because the RNLI are a charity, they can do things their way. They can have
As a replacement for the fact that the British government doesn't want to invest in a border force. Essentially.
But also,
I
think people are quite... I think if you ask anyone about what do you think of the RNLI, they'll only have positive things to say.
Oh, yeah.
They do a good job. But
if you ask...
Get to ride around on speedboats.
What do you mean they get to ride around on speedboats? But they do a good job, and they're very useful.
Yeah.
But if you ask an ex-member of the RNLI, they would say that there's so many careerists in there, and so many people getting paid a lot of money while other people working, risking their lives for nothing.
Yeah.
But like...
That's better than government. That's better than government involvement and trying to justify the existence of the RNLI, and then because the issue is that they enlarge, and then the government say, well, actually no, we can't afford this anymore, and the whole operation goes down, and then you've got the issue of the RNLI might borrow money. That then there's interest paid on that, and then they can't pay it, and it could all just go to so many different ways. I'm not a financier. I shouldn't say financier. That's a slightly antiquated and anti-Semitic term. I'm not an expert on big business.
I'm not a banker.
I'm not a banker. I'm an expert on big business.
What you're describing there is the financial model of the NHS trusts, essentially.
Yeah.
Which is just borrowing and borrowing and borrowing.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. But the government could say, well, you can, because obviously the Conservative government, especially, but New Labour before it could say, well, you can borrow all this extra money off us, and but there's the huge, loaded gun at the head of, well, if this falls through, or there's some other economic disaster or issue in the future, you can't afford to then pay this back, and then the RNLI gets in debt. And it's either going to be constantly bailed out and become another sort of husk like the NHS is, where it has to, for political reasons, it has to be, everything the NHS does has to be good, and the RNLI, in the same way. Or you could keep it in its sort of nice, humble, orange liveried and orange and navy liveried way it is now, and it's quite, and everyone's quite happy with that.
Sponsored by a brand. Remember Johnny English number 2? It was what was it? MI6 sponsored by Toshiba. And it's like, maybe imagine, the BBC sponsored by Sky TV.
Yeah. So, last question of the evening. Oh. This is directed to Chris. What are, and obviously we've been talking about a lot of nice things tonight, but I've only written questions about transgenderism. What exactly are trans rights?
Illusions.
Because it's been pointed out about many of those people from that described feminist sect, because it's not a feminist sect that those feminists like to call themselves. But as far as they're concerned, everybody
rights do they think that they can have?
Everybody in Great Britain, everybody in Great Britain and Northern Ireland has equal representation under the law. There's universal suffrage. So what else? What else could you want?
The issue is not, for example, trans rights. It's not even black rights or women's rights. It's human rights. The issue is only ever human rights, because that's
what do you mean?
Universal. Because it's universal. It's the only way of promoting true equality is to focus solely on human rights and not all of these stupid subsections.
Yeah, but Chris, everyone is human, but not everyone's male, not everyone's female.
But that doesn't matter. In a society that wishes to achieve equality in social terms, certainly not economic, but you can do it
legally as well, of course.
Yeah.
And legally, you can recognise everybody as an individual human, as opposed to assigning people labels and
pigeonholing.
Essentially, well, it's not necessarily. That's not really the right word. It's more like denominating. Into various categories and groups and labels and things like that. You actually lose the meaning of what it is you're trying to achieve.
I really don't think we're talking about intersection. Is it intersectionality, intersectional feminism? But what I'm saying is, obviously,
Raffism. Sorry, go on.
Chris, before women's suffrage and women had to vote, would your answer still be the same? Well, we are all human beings, so it doesn't matter. You got to vote. You're all human beings.
Yeah, you're bringing up a case of a clear social injustice, essentially.
To you? But you...
Well,
okay, then.
No, probably
for other
to people at the time. I'm not there at the time, though, am I?
Okay, but if you're saying that... So you're saying trans movement's not an injustice?
The what?
So you're saying to me that the trans movement is not a social injustice?
No, but we're talking about rights. We're talking about various human rights that have been assigned over the years.
And on the passport...
what rights are they asking for? Because there is no right that they should be able to have, that any human in the capacity of being a human should be permitted to have.
To not have. So, in other words, then there isn't any equality if there are different rights for different people.
Because otherwise, you fall into the very dangerous socialist trap of positive discrimination and reverse racism and things like that. Positive discrimination is still discrimination. Reverse racism is still racism.
But it's not. You don't even have to.
It doesn't matter that you put a nice little turn of phrase on it. Look, it's still what it is at the root.
You don't have to give it the Mosleyan speech there. It's more to do with the fact that if inherently there are different rights for different people, for different demographics, then clearly that's not equality, is it?
No, and I don't think anybody's trying to be above anybody else. I don't think that's what the trans movement's trying to do. I think if you're a person...
It is because some in the movement actually demand that you observe their way of seeing the world, and that is very different to how most civilized people say...
pronoun usage.
Yeah. To prescribe...
Pronoun usage ought to be legal, so if you misgender somebody, then that should be illegal.
And not even be punitive. I mean... They're not even saying that people should have a minor fine for getting this wrong, which to me, for an error of speech should never be.
I wouldn't think
punished, but to actually demand imprisonment for this is actually bordering on the totalitarian.
Evil.
I think it would be very repetitive. I would argue that unless you're inciting violence, physical violence, you should not be prisoned or jailed.
The next issue is that the current narrative is that speech is violent, that speech is inherently violent. Actually, people need to actually stand up to this and say speech and violence are the reciprocals of each other. They're the exact opposite thing. They contradict each other on every level. If you don't have speech, you have violence. If people can't express themselves verbally or the written word or think things, they only have action. Right, and if action is the only way, that sounds like an incredibly fascistic route, because that's what it's about: action, direct action, unthought, and it's a very, very scary way of going.
Chris, do you think that trans people should be allowed to have a bit on their passport or driver license to show that they are transgender or transsexual?
If they are transgender, they would either be man or woman, or male or female, wouldn't they? You can't just invent labels to suit a socio-political purpose, and this goes back to the original question.
Intersex?
Well, that's an obvious exception, but they would identify more with one than the other, wouldn't they?
Well, that's
the one that takes the precedent.
But if they don't, they just say... I don't see as one. They've got let's say they've got breasts, but they've got a penis, and they're quite short-haired and not really a masculine face or anything stereotypical. They are androgynous, as they say.
Well, fair enough. I mean, if biologically that is the case, then an exception is made in that instance. But they do not have a choice as to what gender or biological makeup they have, whereas a person who is transgender does, and that's the difference.
Sorry. Do you think the one transgender and transitioning? Do you think that there has to be a time where they've transitioned, and there's no? Obviously, if you're transsexual, there's a defined cut-off point for the genitalia. But transgender, obviously, there's things of gender fluidity and, person changing back and forth, depending on their mood. These are all genders. Do you think...
Rationalised bipolarism has been said by some. Which is a very contentious thing to say, but...
What was the point there?
I was saying, do you think that if it was clear cut, if it was black and white down as, a biological male transitioned and then change sex to female, that's fine. Nobody has a problem. But do you think the fluidity of...
Well, there's another issue, isn't there? Because a person who has transitioned from supposedly one sex to the other hasn't really done any of that at all. They've simply imitated.
They've not actually metamorphosized, have they?
Without changing their physical biology. Yeah. So they've only been made to resemble the sex that they wish to be. They're not actually the sex.
That's what I was saying. They're not inherently the same gender.
Yeah, and this is the important thing, that on medical details and things like that, there are certain things that women will deal with that men won't, and males rather.
Cancer.
Yeah, but that's exactly. I think we should probably end it before we get into the whole thing of this whole thing of trans people can experience periods and wear tampons and all this, because this will go on all night.
Damien literally just wants to go to bed.
No, it's not that. No, it's not that. It's just because
Hold on, Damien. Chris is going.
Sorry.
I was just going to say. The one notable thing when I first met Rachel Saunders was the fact that she had a death grip for a handshake.
You told me this before, but your handshake is like picking up a wet condom from the night before that you've discarded. Your handshake is like trying to get a dead fish out of a fish bowl, and it just slips away. No, but I don't want to get into the whole thing about trans people and tampons and all these just absurd things that they physically can't do, because by virtue of the insanity of.
But I think
the subject, it can go on forever. They buy fake. You can get fake blood and everything to sort of go through this.
It's
just genital mutilation. That's what it is. It's genital mutilation. It's a form of something that they would probably advocate should be illegal in Africa, but yet they do it to themselves.
I agree, and also
I think that's willing. I think there's consent involved there. If you're
this is the issue. Is something that I know we're all sort of semi-joking here, but something that seriously concerns me is the fact that this is forced upon children and they can't consent. And they're encouraged to doubt who they are as human beings, basic human facts, basic human truths that have survived the whole time humans have existed.
I mean,
and are now being abused, and suffer terrible mental health issues. Not even necessarily because they've been told to doubt their own gender, but that their father is indulged in this nonsense, and they're incredibly disturbed mentally and permanently by this. What do we really call it? But anyway, we'll leave it there because otherwise we get.
I was going to say that as a child, I